here we are. So I'd like to thank my colleague, Ranking Member Titus, for organizing this bipartisan roundtable discussion. It's an important discussion. I want to thank also the industry representatives for your participation and attendance as well. Cargo theft has long been a problem, but it's now reaching epidemic proportions. Thefts from railroads alone increased 40% over the last year. These steps impose $35 billion in cost on the economy and supply chains. These target these supply chains in part because it's lucrative. There's a low chance of them getting arrested, and the prosecution is low. Much of our nation cargo across state lines, thefts are occurring along this supply chain. That makes coordinating both prevention and prosecution difficult. Worse, how thieves are obligating cargo, including by cutting brake lines, sabotaging signals, creating hazards for the train crew and for the public. So anyway, we're excited to have this. What is clear, though, is that the federal government needs to be a better partner. That's what we want to do. That's why we're having this meeting. We want to be a better partner with this, not only you, but the states, supply chains, all that, to develop a more effective response to what's happening. Look forward to hearing your advice. And again, thank you for attending. Appreciate it. Ms. Titus, you want to?
You sitting this so close to y'all, it makes me nervous. Well, thank you, Chairman Webster, for joining me in this, and thank all of you for participating. I think it's a very important discussion that we have. How nice to see our former colleague, Mr. Davis, back with us. We appreciate you coming, and it's always a friendly face. You know, I think y'all have heard me tell the story of how I got interested in retail crime. I was standing in a Walgreens drugstore, and somebody came in, stood beside me, and just started scraping off the false eyelashes into a backpack and walked right out the door. And I knew this guy wasn't wearing that many false eyelashes, so he had to be doing something with them. And I asked the lady, I said, "Did you see that?" And she said, "Yeah, he comes in here every day." And then that led me to learn more about retail crime and how it's tied to criminal activity beyond just the stealing of the eyelashes. Then, Mr. Jeffries, you mentioned how it was a problem for cargo crime, for railroads, and then it's also come to our attention for trucking. A little bit different of an issue with fraud, but still, I think there are some things in common that we can talk about. There are a couple of bills that are already out there, but I don't know that they do enough, or maybe we can finesse some of those or come up with something else. You heard Mr. Webster talk about the statistics that merit our attention. I would just add to that $15 to $30 billion every year. We heard the recent $2 million worth of Nikes that were stolen in Arizona. You know, it's just a growing problem, and it ties into these criminal elements that do drug trafficking, human trafficking, other kinds of major crime. We've got the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, CORCA, that I've introduced with Mr. Joyce. That doesn't come to T&I, but we still, and it involves us, so we need to be engaged in it. And then Ms. Norton's bill with Mr. Ezell, household goods, that looks at trucking crime. But let's hear from you all about what we can do better and some things that all of you have in common that we might be able to put into legislation or regulation, or at least draw attention to the issue, because it's not just about the price of things, it's also a safety issue for people who work in the industry and for the kind of neighboring communities around where these crimes occur, people who live there or have businesses there. So I think it is something that merits our attention, and it's great to have you as the experts who are here to talk to us about it and give us some advice. So if it's okay with you, Mr. Webster, can we just start by having everybody take a few minutes to give us a little synopsis of how these kind of crimes impact their industry for, 2 or 3 minutes, and then we'll go into kind of some more substantive details, unless two of y'all want to make it. Mr. Nels, you want to make a statement first?
I can't wait to hear from the Honorable Dave.
Okay, well, we'll start with you, Honorable Davis.
We'll see if I still know how to make these microphones work. Chairman Webster, Ranking Member Titus, my good friend Chairman Nels, thanks for allowing me the opportunity to be here on behalf of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce and the members of the U.S. Chamber of Commerce who make up the largest trade association in the world. The Chamber's been a national leader in the fight to end retail crime, and calling the retail crime a national crisis in a letter to Congress and state leaders as early as March of 2022. Our efforts have recently expanded to include combating rising supply chain crime that affects many of the members and groups that are sitting here as witnesses with me today. While other crime seems to be decreasing, as was mentioned, Mr. Chairman, retail crime saw a 24% increase in 2024. And our friends at CargoNet showed a similarly alarming 27% increase in cargo theft incidents from 2023 to 2024. These retail crime and cargo theft incidents are often the product of sophisticated, organized crime rings that require a coordinated response from lawmakers, police, prosecutors, and the business community. We at the U.S. Chamber of Commerce believe that when people break the law, they should be held accountable for those crimes, thus deterring future criminals from doing the exact same thing. The Chamber's working to unite these stakeholders to come up with different approaches and different ideas and different awareness advocacy campaigns to ensure that crime like this doesn't slip through the cracks of law enforcement in the future. We're also ready to work with you to address weak prosecutors and those who slip through those cracks of law enforcement and are free to go out and do these crimes again, commit these crimes again. Congress and the states responded to the call from the business community by passing the INFORM Act in December of 2022, requiring disclosures and verification of online seller information, and the passage of over 21 state laws aimed at combating organized retail crime. But still more work needs to be done this Congress. In December, the U.S. Chamber hosted an event sponsored by UPS featuring government and business leaders on supply chain security and retail crime. The event featured my former colleagues and your colleagues, Congressman David Valadao and Congressman Brad Schneider, officials from DHS and UPS, Travelers, Garmin, Union Pacific, and the American Trucking Association, among others. The Chamber also supports, as mentioned Ranking Member Titus, CORCA, the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, which was just introduced this Congress and has been expanded to include supply chain crime to its retail crime focus. This bipartisan bill, introduced by my good friend Dave Joyce and Susie Lee and others, as has been mentioned, and also in the Senate companion bill has been introduced by Senator Grassley and Senator Cortez Masto. This bill's focus on coordination of federal efforts is exactly what our experts in this area say is desperately needed to build on the successful laws and prosecutions at the state level. This builds off successful legislation that was introduced last Congress that the Chamber also supported. But I also have to say California has been a specific focus of the U.S. Chamber efforts in combating retail crime and cargo theft. In addition to our support for the Valadao bill last Congress, the Chamber brought former Rep. Mike Garcia and Congressman Jimmy Panetta together for a discussion on retail crime and its severe impact in California cities last year. California has been a very active ground for retail crime legislation by passing 12 state laws addressing this problem in 2024. However, more action on cargo theft in California is desperately needed, as has been reported a 72% increase in cargo thefts just in the first quarter of 2024. The U.S. Chamber is going to continue to work with all of you, work with our stakeholders to address this issue and to address retail crime and cargo theft, but it has to have, as mentioned, a combined federal, state, and local nexus to really make an impact. We stand ready to work with you and all of my witnesses here with me. I'll yield back, and I can't wait for the questions. You had the gavel.
I'll keep it at 2. First, let me begin thanking Chair Webster, Ranking Member Titus, Congressman Nels for your interest and support of this critically important issue. We appreciate you shining a light on this issue as we sit here today. Over the past 5 years, both the frequency of cargo thefts and the value of goods stolen have risen dramatically. Before 2020, rail cargo theft was often a crime of opportunity. But today, it is a calculated, coordinated activity executed by sophisticated domestic and transnational criminal organizations. As mentioned, in 2024 alone, cargo thefts cost Class 1 railroads in total over $100 million, with incidents up over 40% from the year prior. This is not just a rail problem, as I know we're going to discuss today. It's an economy-wide problem. It's an economic security problem. It's a national security problem. Truckers, retailers, manufacturers, and ports are all being targeted, and policymakers must recognize, and I think the folks here today do recognize, that cargo theft threatens every link in the supply chain. These crimes cross industries and state lines, and they demand a unified, multi-layered federal response. And that's why we are certainly supportive of your efforts on the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, as my colleague Mr. Davis mentioned. CORCA would provide several tools needed to better coordinate law enforcement efforts, create centralized reporting structures, and ensure prosecutors have the resources they need to bring these criminals to justice. Prosecution is key. We often have arrests, and a former law enforcement official sitting here today, the law enforcement often makes the arrests, but nothing becomes of them. We had one railroad arrest the same person 4 times in one day with no prosecution. We had another railroad involved in arresting an individual 17 times, the same person, with no prosecution. Prosecution is key in deterring this problem from growing larger. And so today we're making, as an industry, tens of millions of dollars in investments in deterrence, infrastructure upgrades, security apparatus, but we do need federal action to disrupt these criminal networks. What is key to interstate crime on interstate commerce. So again, thank you for your leadership on the issue, and thank you for drawing your attention to this important matter.
Well, my name is Eddie Strom. I'm from Arizona, so I'm an active locomotive engineer on Union Pacific Railroad. With 27 years of railroad experience, I hold several positions with the Brotherhood of Locomotive Engineers and Trainmen, a division of the Teamsters Rail Conference. I have seen firsthand train robberies, vandalism, and sabotage. I was most recently on a train on Friday, so I'm working every day. I will share 2 personal experiences. First, I was on an intermodal train in 2024 that was 12,000 foot long. Thieves turned the angle cocks on the train, which is part of the air brake system, so they could steal from the train. It took hours and multiple railroad crafts and local agencies to get that train back on the move. There were multiple container doors open. Second, I was on a manifest train in the same area. About a month later, vandals put a railroad tie in the middle of the rail at a 45-degree angle. Luckily, we were not going at normal track speed, but we hit it at 17 miles an hour. It sounded like a bomb going off inside the cab. We did our inspections of the train, and thankfully, we did not derail. After completing inspections, we were told to bring it into the yard. I looked back and saw some smoke from a rail car. My conductor found it was a boxcar full of huge rolls of paper that the vandals had set on fire. It took multiple crafts and agencies to get that train back moving. Knowing I was going to be a part of this discussion, I asked a few engineers from Union Pacific and BNSF railroads to count container doors that were open on passing trains. 2 engineers from UP reported back in just 4 working days, they counted 104 container doors open. BNSF engineers said almost every train has 20-plus container doors open, and they never get closed until something bad happens. For example, a passing train hit a container door on the lead locomotive. It tore off the visor and the mirror of that lead locomotive. That train was instructed to stop and to close the containers. There were 40 containers that were closed on that train alone. This kind of stuff rarely happened in the past 20 years of my railroad career. But now, because of PSR, precision scheduled railroading, we are seeing a lot of things that were considered safety concerns before, and the railroads are turning a blind eye to. PSR has directly caused this problem to get way worse as railroads cutting staff in all crafts, including railroad police, and all trains are now double or triple in length. Both factors make it way more likely for the robbers to target these trains. So I'm looking forward to this discussion so that the railroads can get back to a safer and more efficient railroad for its employees, the customers, and the public. Thanks.
Thank you. My members at the American Trucking Associations range from just a few trucks to multi-billion-dollar companies. And at some level, they're all dealing with this issue. The way I say it is, they're all victims. They're either victims of crime and cargo theft, or they are spending so much money to try not to be a victim that they're also a victim, right? It's just one way they're getting hit one way or another. Of course, we all know about straight theft. It's been going on in the industry for a long time. But what is really advanced is strategic theft. It's these advanced cyber tactics. They're tricking fleets, shippers, brokers, and we're inadvertently delivering the freight right to the criminals, right? Often it's out of the country, it's gone before we even know it because it's these transnational criminal organizations targeting us. We also have some issues with FMCSA's registration system. So when we go in, my members can't tell if it's a legitimate carrier, if it's not a legitimate carrier. And this has been on the rise here recently, and in fact, since 2021 is up 1,500%, this type of strategic theft. So, and then the other thing that happens is when one of my members is a victim of one of these crimes, they'll contact local law enforcement, state, and even federal, and the answer is typically, turn it into your insurance company, right? So yes, Ian's right, we do have arrests that are not prosecuted, but sometimes they don't even make the arrest because they're like, well, where did the freight start? Where exactly was it stolen? We don't always know that, and so it's like a jurisdiction problem. So we need, only the federal government has the authority, the resources, the technical abilities to mount an effective response, right? ATA looks forward to working with members of this committee on solutions to safeguard our entire supply chain, including trucking, protect their businesses, their employees, and ultimately lower costs for consumers. Thank you very much. Well, we have a good insurance company here. I'm sure he was at, so I would actually defer to him on some of that.
Oh, it's on?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman Webster. Thank you, Ranking Member Titus, for assembling us today. This is a very august panel of experts. I'm not just complimenting myself. We do really have some very strong experts in this field, so hopefully we can have a good dialogue and find some solutions. As one of our CargoNet friends, Keith Lewis, says, combating cargo theft is a team sport. It should involve collaboration and cooperation with everybody. When I think about our members, we are the Intermodal Association of North America, so we are those who touch the container. So if you think about the life cycle of the container from the beginning where the goods are actually loaded into the container to the end receiver, there's a lot of places along the way where theft can occur. So how do we prevent for that? Well, I think about cargo theft in three buckets. One is obviously prevention. So that container, when it's getting loaded, if it has sensors, door sensors that can detect if that door is opening, if it has RFID technology that lets you know the visibility of where the container is, that's enormously helpful. So there's a prevention. Then detection. That's knowing where it is happening. If you can talk to your police, you can get them involved right away so that within 30 minutes, if you can get someone there in 30 minutes, typically that's how long a crime takes to steal from a container. If you can get them in 30 minutes, you can actually retrieve a lot of the stolen goods or prevent it from happening altogether. And then finally, with enforcement, that's where you all come in. It's getting those perpetrators off the streets so they don't do the crimes over and over again. We all have a role to play in terms of information sharing, data gathering, and so our members are investing in it. As Mr. Costello said, if you don't invest in it, you're going to lose your business, and some of our members have. So I look forward to the rest of the discussion. Thank you.
Chairman Webster, Ranking Member Titus, and members of the committee present here today, I want to thank you for the opportunity to address this threat of organized theft, targeting not only the railroads and trucking industry, but also the retail sector. As a representative of the National Retail Federation, I speak today on behalf of the retail community. These organized criminal groups are increasingly stealing cargo from rail cars and trucks, which poses a direct threat to our entire supply chain, commerce, and retail industries. These thefts are not isolated incidents by opportunistic criminals, but part of a broader network of organized retail crime, where stolen goods are resold to fund other criminal enterprises. These sophisticated and often transnational groups exploit weaknesses in security, infrastructure, and law enforcement coordination. They monitor shipping routes, identify security gaps, and frequently conduct thefts in remote areas where law enforcement response is limited. Their targets range from consumer goods and electronics to pharmaceuticals and essential supplies. Their goal is purely financial, moving stolen goods through illicit and illegal domestic resale markets or exporting them abroad, fueling further criminal activity. The impact of these thefts are immense. Billions of dollars are lost annually, disrupting every link in the logistics chain. Retailers face delayed inventories and increased costs to replace products, while transportation and distribution companies must spend significant resources to investigate these incidents and implement additional security measures. Food, medicine, and other perishable items are particularly vulnerable, raising product safety concerns as stolen goods are often improperly stored or sold past expiration dates. Consumers depend on the retail industry to deliver safe and timely products, yet these thefts across the entire logistics and supply chain erode confidence in our national economy. This crisis demands a coordinated response across federal, state, and local agencies. Public and private partnerships must strengthen intelligence sharing, enhance investigative efforts, and close regulatory loopholes that allow these criminal enterprises to flourish. I'd like to thank Ranking Member Titus for her support as being an original sponsor of the Corca bill, Chairman Webster and other members of this committee who are also co-sponsors of the existing Combating Organized Retail Crime Act of 2025. This act will help dismantle these criminal networks involved in cargo theft and retail crimes by improving investigative capabilities, strengthening penalties for those criminal groups, and increasing resources for law enforcement. With this legislation, we can protect our transportation infrastructure, safeguard our supply chain, and defend American businesses and consumers against organized theft. 94% of our retailers believe federal legislation is the necessary next step in curtailing this issue. I look forward to answering your questions, discussing solutions, and collaborating with you to resolve this issue. Thank you.
Chairman Webster, Ranking Member Titus, and distinguished members of the subcommittee, it's my honor to be here today. Thank you for your time. My name is Scott Cornell. I serve as the Vice President and National Practice Lead for Transportation for Travelers Insurance. I've spent over 2 decades focused on cargo theft prevention, including 11 years with our Special Investigations Group, where I helped launch the first dedicated cargo theft investigation unit in the insurance industry. At Travelers, we insure a large portion of the nation's freight carriers, and we've recovered over $130 million in stolen goods for our clients. Because of this, our clients count on us to stay ahead of this threat. And one of the fastest growing trends we're seeing, as has been mentioned here several times today, is what's considered or called strategic cargo theft. Cargo theft as a whole fundamentally changed in the United States sometime between 2020 and 2022. It changed from being conducted by primarily unsophisticated small regional groups that were maybe 8 to 10 in size and were somewhat rather unsophisticated in their methods, primarily conducting what we consider straight theft, which means they go straight out to the freight and steal it where it sits, truck stops, parking lots, drop lots, you name it. to now being conducted primarily by organized, very sophisticated international crime rings. Cargo theft, according to CargoNet data, from 2022 to 2024 has increased over 90%. That subcategory of strategic cargo theft has increased 1,475%, moving from roughly 3% of all cargo theft to somewhere around 33% of all cargo theft, and continuing to climb. These methods are extremely sophisticated. They use various methods of trickery, as stated, to trick the members of the supply chain into giving them the freight. And these methods continue to get more sophisticated every day. Yeah, it's very easy. And when you are conducting cargo theft from another country, it's hard for you to actually be here, right? It also keeps them out of harm's way, meaning they don't have to physically be on site risking themselves getting caught stealing the freight, when they can actually impersonate a freight broker, hire a legitimate trucking company to go pick up the freight for them and have them move the freight. It allows them to be anywhere and steal freight anywhere, and the methods continue to get more sophisticated. I currently also serve as the chairman of the Transported Asset Protection Association, which is a nonprofit organization, TAPA, where we work across sectors to promote supply chain security and standards. I look forward to sharing practical insight today and discussing how public and private collaboration can help us get ahead of increasingly sophisticated threat on cargo theft. The top 10 states currently for cargo theft are California, Texas, Illinois, Arizona, New Jersey, Georgia, Pennsylvania, Tennessee, Ohio, and Florida. So it's kind of the perfect storm for most of those areas, right? They're either port cities or they have large rail areas. They have strong economies, high population density, arterial highways. So you have the freight, you have the money, you have the people, and so that's where most cargo theft has been concentrated. Now, with the increase in strategic cargo theft, we're seeing cargo theft spread into what we would consider non-traditional areas. In Southern California, if you move freight in Southern California currently in this environment, you're on pins and needles. So you tend to take a lot more care on who you're assigning the freight to right now. But if they target a load in Cheyenne, Wyoming, where people are not used to cargo theft, do not commonly deal with cargo theft, they may not ask as many questions. It's easier to target that freight. So we're seeing them spread into what we consider non-traditional cargo theft areas now.
Okay, well, this is kind of an informal thing, so we're not going to have a timer. I'm not going to call on you. If somebody wants to ask you a question, fine. If you want to answer a question, then fine. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, for convening this discussion and truly alarming testimony, in particular with respect to my state of California, where, Mr. Davis, you note that it's gotten completely out of control. I think about a 70% increase in the first quarter of last year. And frankly, this is true of theft in general in California, so much so that the people of our state took matters into their own hands and passed an initiative to strengthen penalties for retail theft with almost 70% of the vote last year because the legislature refused to do anything. So I know that our legislature sort of gestured at taking some actions against retail theft. Do you think that they've gone far enough, Mr. Davis? And given that there is a federal nexus here, what could we do in Congress, and kind of what are the bounds of federal jurisdiction within which we can act to actually help bring things under control in California?
Well, thanks for your question, Congressman. It's great to see you again. First off, I'm glad that California and the California Assembly has decided to address this problem by passing 12 new state laws. Now, I'm not in California, so I would turn it over to you and my colleagues from that state to determine whether or not those state laws are working well enough to address that 72% increase at the beginning of last year. If those laws are not working as we intended to get that crime rate down substantially, then yes, I do believe that there should be and could be a federal nexus as part of that partnership that I mentioned earlier, which said federal, state, and local. It's a federal, state, and local issue. And where you, as the T&I committee members, I think should focus your efforts is getting an idea of where the holes are. Because California being kind of the center point of cargo theft now, the center point of laws that have been passed at the state level to address this issue, the center point of some of maybe the prosecutorial problems that existed in our country in addressing this issue, you will be, once we can get with our members of the Chamber of Commerce and members of organizations that many of the folks that are sitting at the table with me represent, if we can get a whole picture of what's working with those 12 state laws and what's not, I think we can better pinpoint what your federal responsibility should be.
Great, thank you. And I'd invite anyone else to weigh in on this question, kind of what are the bounds of federal jurisdiction? Mr. Johnston, Mr. Fromm.
One other thing to note too is that certainly the bill from Mikey Ezell and Chairwoman and Congressman Eleanor Holmes Norton would seek to have agencies actually enforce the laws that are already on the books. So to the extent that there are registration holes in that there are illegitimate companies that can escape detection because the FMCSA registration system has been so antiquated. I do know that they're trying to update it, and it's been a long journey for them in terms of the technology that they could use. However, if they actually just verify who they're doing business with so that companies that register don't also already have 199 other motor carrier numbers, which has happened, that would be enormously helpful. And also, if they were penalized for acts of fraud, which the FMCSA arguably has the power to do, but the bill introduced, the Household Good Protection Act, would make sure that they did it.
When it comes to California with regard to cargo theft, no state, in the 30 years that I've been doing this, no state in the nation has had more dedicated law enforcement around cargo theft. The CTIPS task force, which is the Highway Patrol, is one of the best that we've seen. LAPD has their own cargo theft unit. Last week, they just had a very successful bust around a large cargo theft ring in the LA County Sheriffs, and there's been some other task forces that have come and gone throughout the state. But those task forces have been reduced in size over the years, and they continue to work as diligently as they can. I think having a federal task force that can interact, as the Corca bill calls for, a federal task force that can interact with the various states, especially the states that fall in that top 10, maybe top 15, and coordinate with any state-based task force efforts or dedication efforts that they have would be the right way to go.
I'd like to add to that, from the retailer's perspective, yes, California, what we've seen, at least initially after Prop 36, has been an increased support of law enforcement. The task forces that are staged there from the California Highway Patrol to the different counties are stepping up and really in support of the retail community. Well, one of the challenges that still exist in many of these task forces, as Mr. Cornell had mentioned, will tell you is the resources that they have and the cross-jurisdictional capabilities of the criminals. That the moment they cross a state border, it is no longer a local or a state issue. And that's where these individuals become more sophisticated, more regional and transnational in their criminal activities, which really force the need for federal support and capabilities to even support the investigations of state and local.
I'd like to talk about the holes that in the system. California is a neighbor to Arizona, and the holes that we're seeing is that when the trains are being built in these facilities, and they have to double or triple over in the tracks that they once were in, it puts them in vulnerable places for theft to happen. So when that happens, those doors and those containers and these crime organizations are stealing at that point. They're not stealing inside the facility. They're stealing outside of the facility. So there's holes there. Train length has been a big issue because the infrastructure on the railroads doesn't fit the train length out on the rail. They have to stage trains in certain areas for those other high priority trains to get by. When they stage those trains in those certain areas, then the crime organizations know where those are at, and that's where they steal at as well. Container doors, they're open all the time. They don't close them. They will go 500, 600, 700 miles before the next door is closed. So I think that looking into the idea of, you know, where these holes are, those are where the holes are at.
Do people in your local, do they feel threatened?
I'm normally up on the engine, so it's easier for me to stay up on the engine, but a conductor, when he has to go back when there's something wrong with the train, yes. On BNSF, there was with that snaker thing, and the conductor had to go back, and there was armed robbers back there. So he just walked back up to the head end. It is a issue with our members being scared going back. Those two incidents that I talked about, I called for a PO in the area. They weren't around, so they had to send out Carmen and management to help us in that area because there was homeless camps as well. And in these high urban areas, it's just opportunity, opportunity, opportunity when they're outside of the fences of these facilities. So
I think that's why it's so important that we have a focus on prosecution. And, won't surprise you that we might not necessarily see eye to eye on a couple of things here. I don't think there's any data showing there's a correlation between train length and cargo theft. But what we are talking about, though, is, employees being put into dangerous situations. And so when there's no deterrent from the prosecution side, it does nothing to keep people from coming back. And I remember an instance in the LA Basin where some folks were apprehended, and they said, that's fine, we'll be back tonight. Like, we'll get put in jail, we'll be back tonight. And gangs had drones flying over the railroads, tracking where things were moving. One of our railroads has a fleet of drones across its southern transcon, tracking trains and for security reasons. Well, we found out that railroad's drones are one of the most tracked drones out there by organized criminal syndicates. And so when there's no teeth on the back end, when it comes to enforcement and prosecuting and hitting people hard so they don't come back, then there's no discouragement whatsoever that's going to keep them from getting bolder and bolder and bolder, and frankly, putting my colleagues, folks, in a risky situation, which neither of us want to happen.
And unfortunately, it appears just the way we seem to do things up here. It's almost like people have to die and get killed before we actually do something. I mean, we've had issues with air traffic control and this and that. You finally have a tragedy that takes place right in our city here, and now we're actually starting to do something to pay attention to ATC. It's things like that, and I think it's sad. So for us to try to be proactive, maybe the pain isn't real enough. Maybe isn't it sad to say? It's sad to say it, but the pain isn't real enough. I think you see crime is increasing. You have California. It's my understanding. Correct me if I'm wrong, but it's like in some of these towns, whether it's the Walmart, if it was under a certain threshold, they wouldn't even prosecute you. So I guess the bad guy, the bad hombre, could say, well, I could steal up to $700, walk out of the Walmart, not have to worry about being charged because it's under a certain amount of money. Was that not true? Anybody want to comment on that? Yeah. I mean, it was all over the news, and it took place for a very long time. And the criminals are sophisticated enough to think, well, if I can do it at the Walmart, I might as well jump on one of your trains and do the same thing. And I agree with you, not on everything, but I agree with you on this issue. When you have soft on crime policies, which you have in California, this is the type of behavior you're going to see. I think one way to try to resolve some of this is to bubbles, and then I'm gonna shut up. It's self-induced. We cause our own problem because we don't enforce the laws that we fairly have.
When we talk about enforcement, I think one of the reasons that it's very important to entertain a federal task force is because, as stated early on, many of these organized crime rings are being operated from other countries, right? So you can effectively arrest the boots on the ground, so to speak, here in the United States, but those organized rings in other countries will send replacements over in rather short time, right? Oh, no, 100%. I'm agreeing with you 100%. But I'm saying beyond that, we need to have some kind of that federal reach that can potentially have an impact on the foreign entities too, that will continue to send replacement people over here once we get the prosecution in place over here. So also with regard to telematics, we work with our clients very closely to teach them how to prevent cargo theft, and we preach the use of tracking and covert tracking pretty regularly as the third layer in a three-layer approach to preventing cargo theft. I would note, though, that we do see cargo thefts regularly spoof and suppress tracking efforts. In other words, they have what are called, commonly known as sniffers, to sniff out the tracking devices. They will remove those devices. If they're light sensory, they will put them in paint cans, leave them in the paint can at the truck stop so that you think that the truck and trailer are still parked where they're supposed to be. There's even been intelligence that's shown that they've actually taken the tracking devices, put them in the trunk of a car, driven the car along the route that the freight is supposed to go, pulled the car into the consignee's parking lot so that the freight broker now has a record of the freight moving across the country and entering the parking lot of the destination of the freight. And so now you begin the argument of, no, we have records that show that the freight arrived, and the consignee is saying your freight never arrived. And they do this not only obviously to spoof the tracking, but also to cause that delay in the argument by creating the argument in and of itself that the freight did or did not arrive.
So I think, and this is one key part of the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act, is that sharing information, creating kind of standardized reporting of information so that there's a centralized approach to identifying, okay, let's go after this area. Let's try to cut the head off the snake here, so that the government can really see trends, and then hopefully get U.S. attorneys to then focus in and say, look, there's really something here. Here's the data to show it. We need your support to go and drop the hammer on these folks because we know who's doing it sometimes. And so, yes, absolutely, there's that shared info nexus out there.
If I may add, Ranking Member Titus, is also that shared information between the public agencies at state, local, and federal level and the private sector. Because many of our organizations and associations and members have strengthened their investigative units and have great intelligence to share, and often do share, with law enforcement at state, local, and federal levels. But what we're starting to see is some of these larger cases are developing and taking in some of the resources of the federal agencies, is that some of these groups are not only operating, they're not operating solely on cargo theft and retail crime in the stores. It's the same larger organizations that are using these groups in different methods, including even the strategic cargo thefts, where we're starting to see these groups are becoming more sophisticated, more organized, more hierarchically based, better than our law enforcement agencies at the state and local level. They're trying better than our collective efforts today, because we don't have the shared intelligence and investigative resources, as I said earlier, to cross borders and to expand jurisdictions to go after those, as was mentioned, the heads of the snake.
Analogy, I think, would be after 9/11, there was an incredible effort between the public and private sector to suss out intelligence on terrorist acts, particularly the railroads, who stood up the Transportation Security Operations Center, which is now housed in DOT, and the ability to share that information because it was ever changing. And as our colleagues are saying, these criminals are ever changing. As soon as you come up with something to deter them, the criminals find some way to counteract that. And so because it is an ever-shifting enterprise, we need to have constant communication and collaboration.
And Ranking Member Titus, your point is well made on reporting. One of the biggest gaps that the industry deals with currently is that there is no uniform reporting of cargo theft across the United States. In other words, a police officer in California may report it under a cargo theft state-related statute, or they could report it as an auto theft. A police officer in Iowa could report it as burglary of a vehicle. So these cargo theft statistics get diluted into many other categories of crime. Whereas if we can get some standardized reporting through the Corca bill or any other means where cargo theft is being reported as cargo theft uniformly across the country, we would get more consistency in numbers. Right now, the industry depends largely on an organization called CargoNet, was a various company that tracks cargo theft that's voluntarily reported to them by members, some law enforcement entities, insurance companies like ours, to try and help the industry understand the severity of cargo theft. Having said that, their cumulative numbers are probably actually about 1/10 to 1/15 of all actual cargo theft that takes place in the United States, because there is no mandatory or uniform reporting of cargo theft across the country.
In terms of cargo theft, I know in California, there's always a concern that, a reporting, you get some insurance costs go up, some other things are, have you dealt with that in terms of from your members and broadly? In terms, I guess I'm curious, you say there's no uniform reporting, so how is it, I mean, every state does it differently? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, in fact, every police officer can do it differently, right, depending on how they want to take the report, because there is no uniform method of reporting it right now, like there is more so for like an auto theft or a burglary. While each different department may have a different way of reporting those crimes, they're commonly reported in similar ways. That doesn't exist for cargo theft. When it comes to reporting, your question about reporting in the industry, for us, we encourage our clients to report to us because we have a dedicated cargo theft team that will investigate cargo theft on their behalf. But as a whole, the industry is spotty on reporting. Some entities do report, some do not, and it can be for various reasons. It can be simply that they're not involved in organizations where the reporting is taken in, but because they would have to go out and report it themselves, sometimes it just doesn't happen.
And the other thing is, a lot of trucking companies don't want to go out there and say, hey, I've gotten freight stolen, because they're afraid they're going to lose customers from that. So other customers, right? So I think there's been underreporting, as you've heard, for a long time, but that is changing. Like, it is getting so bad now that they're like realizing as an industry, they're not alone. And so I think we can do a lot better job. But what we need is, and I've talked to federal prosecutors about this, if you get one truck stolen, that might be worth $100,000. But there's a bigger organization behind that that has stolen, many trucks, trailers, and taken that. And if you add that up, then you meet the federal thresholds of prosecution. But right now, that's not happening because we don't have that data to go behind that so that they realize it's the same organization.
So is there a weak link? Like shippers, producers, retailers?
Well, there's really no place to report it, Chairman Webster, so they may report it to the police, right? And we do see that almost anybody who is a victim of cargo theft consistently will report it to the police. But as I mentioned, it's not all being reported in the same way or in a uniform manner. So if a shipper in Texas reports it to the police and that is entered differently than a police officer in California or Iowa takes a similar report from another shipper, those numbers don't all come together, so we don't get those statistics that would help us see the bigger picture.
I would just say, too, that there's a problem with pilferage. It's hard to detect, perhaps, that there have been not an entire container gone. He'll know, his members will know if their truckload is gone. However, if you have pilferage, and so they're just parts of the container that are missing, some electronic goods that are gone, you should have had 2,500 and you have 2,475. That's not necessarily known until way after the fact, which adds to the problem.
I'd like to say, railroad police were prevalent, before 2020, and railroad police were the backbone of the railroad industry. They would roll trains in, they would close container doors, they would take people off the trains. They are just not as present as they once were. They could be a resource to conducting this kind of theft, and reporting it to the different entities. We don't see them out in the rail industry as much as we once did. And I think it's kind of funny because this is something that's been going on since 1800, 160 years. And, and there for a long time, they had the Pinkertons. The Pinkertons, everyone knows that they were the ones that stopped and they were the force to be reckoned with. So I think that, taking the boots on the ground approach to this and, having each entity from state, local, state, and then up to the federal government is a good process, but we need to have somebody there to actually say what's going on in the field, and that's those railroad police officers.
Yeah, so on top of what is a robust railroad police outfit across all railroads, the head of BNSF's police just testified in the Senate last month about a lot of the activities they're engaged in and continue to focus on. But technology continues to play a role there. So like I said, drone deterrence, security cameras, infrastructure hardening. But we also operate a 140,000-mile network so that you can't, put razor wire across the tracks, throughout the whole network. So it's a strategic approach. But included in that that cost to the industry as far as from cargo theft, tens of millions of dollars of increased security investments are the result of that as well.
On those two incidents that I did report, I did talk to local police and, railroad management, and they did fix part of the problem. They did make fencing, that's cut-through fencing, down in high urban area of Tucson. It's just a deterrent, though, because now they found a way to cut through it. They found ways to get inside of it. It is slowing the process, but it is an eyesore. It's something that we're not used to, but it is something that they have done, along with drone testing.
What would the penalty have to be in return?
Well, I saw, I don't know if y'all have seen on, this is on LinkedIn, there's a gonzo journalist who's following a train in Bakersfield, California. And
That's where, as I represent.
Well, I don't know if you saw this, and if you haven't, I'll send it to you. But the journalist interviewed one of these cargo thieves who said he can make $25,000 a week. So it seems to me that it has to be somewhat north of that in order to be a deterrent.
I mean, I've seen, I've worked with our local CHP. They tell me that cargo theft and rail theft has exponentially increased significantly. And, Gavin Newsom was in the news back in the day. The LA Times had this front page photo of this rail yard that was strewn with, retail materials, and he came in and cleaned it up, made sure that no one came back, 2 months later. I'm sure it's unfortunately probably the way it is. So I'm just in California. My colleague from Texas is correct. We had Prop 47 and then Prop 36 passed, and now DAs can aggregate. But to your point, if every state does something different, you don't get the aggregate benefit of a deterrent.
And Representative Fong, if I could, that is exactly where the Combating Organized Retail Crime Act places aggregation into Title 18. Because as you had mentioned, California with their new Prop 36 on the retail crime, they added aggregation. And we have seen interviews of criminals shocked that they're getting arrested and going to jail now because what are you talking about? The crimes I did 2 weeks ago count today? And yes, it does. It's a crime.
So the smash and grab, I mean, that was designed for the smash and grabs, but
That was designed for any type of organized habitual criminals who are stealing for greed, not need, you know. And so the current Combating Organized Retail Crime Act has an inclusion in there to add aggregation to Title 18, as Mr. Costello had mentioned earlier. That means that a single container theft, if it's under that threshold, because it doesn't add to the volume, can be added to crimes that they may be doing in another state, that same criminal organization. And collectively, that meets the threshold of federal prosecution, federal investigative support. So that's where we believe, our retailers believe, that aggregation of criminal activity is a positive step in the right direction.
So just so I understand, on the federal side, can a federal prosecutor aggregate or no?
I believe they can if they can tie the ring activity together, right?
But that requires the data and the investigation.
Correct.
And conspiracy.
Correct.
And that's where Title 8, if I'm not a lawyer, I'm not an attorney.
not one
but
either.
I believe that's what the purpose of the inclusion of aggregation
Correct.
into Title 18 with the Corca Act is to update the law so that it's multiple thefts, multiple victims, same group.
And that may be an area we have to really delve into.
Flush out.
Flush
Yeah,
out the aggregation.
and Mr. Johnson's point is critical that, you know, these organized rings are conducting cargo theft in multiple states. So being able to tie those multiple thefts together to one organized ring and aggregate those together is critical. Plus, when you take into consideration the fact that they're stealing it in one state and moving it across multiple state lines, right, that will add up into the prosecution's favor.
Congressman, I would just add on the rail side in particular, because some of this has been going on since the 1800s. We actually do have some decent language on the federal law books. So a lot of this is just getting U.S. attorneys to focus resources and focus energy. And that's where we were so pleased in February when a grand jury in Arizona indicted 11 individuals who hopefully are going to serve real jail time that is either going to allow you to start working up the crime chain domestically or deter additional people from as easily being recruited to make that 25 grand when they know, wait a minute, when I get caught, I'm going to get prosecuted and I'm going to go to jail for a long time. Maybe it's not worth it.
You mentioned Arizona. So much of the focus has been on California and its liberal laws and not going after criminals and all that. It's not the case in Georgia or in Texas. So let's talk about things that are more generally happening to make prosecution better in all kinds of states, not just focused on California.
Right, and California, or sorry, Arizona just recently entered the top 10, right? And in some ways, that's driven by the fact that so much freight moves out of a neighboring state. And that's, you know, California has the largest port in the United States. So there's a ton of freight moving out of California, so they will target it as it moves across the country. Nevada is starting to see increases in numbers as well. Utah will see that when they declare an inland port, which I believe they're supposed to do next year or maybe later this year. When you look at Arizona as an example, in particular on the west side of the state, we see heavy doses of pilferage, what we call follow crews that come out of California and will follow the freight across because the drivers will make a point to reach Arizona before they stop because of the difference in fuel prices. So then they will stop when they reach Arizona, and then they will be hit by the pilferage crews or full truckload theft.
I want to note that Arizona we did pass a bill last year that was an assault, if they assault transportation workers, that it's a felony. I mean, we would have to find what everyone here is talking about, a way to make that the same kind of language for when this kind of thing happens in each state. I mean, I will work hard in Arizona to try to get something like that through. So just wanted to mention that.
Thank you all for coming today. I appreciate the witnesses. You did a great job. Learned a lot. It's good. See what happens. I hope things will happen. Thanks for your input.